So can the elites in Davos help create lasting prosperity, or is there something broken with our economy which means that most people are stuck with the prospect of falling living standards or doing more for less? Well, with me are Martin Parker, who lives nearby and who is Professor of Management at Leicester University, and Ruth Porter, the Head of Economic and Social Policy at the right-leaning think tank Policy Exchange. Ruth Porter, can I begin with you? I mean, the problem with Davos is that it is just seen as full of champagne-quaffing elites who know nothing and can do nothing for ordinary people's lives.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly didn't get an invite. It's definitely the rich and the powerful that are there. But I think what's interesting is if we go back and we think about, well, why did Davos start? And the thinking behind it, the reason it was originally set up, was because there was this idea that actually businesses have an impact beyond their shareholders. So businesses should be engaging and talking with consumers, they should be talking with politicians, they should be talking with civil society and academics.
Top 1,000 companies in the world. It's easy to see who's benefiting from this.
Well, I think what's particularly interesting in this year, if you fast forward to now from that original intent, and you look at the context in the UK, but also in other countries, I think there is this sense, particularly now we're coming out of recession in the West, that we're sitting around and we're asking, you know, how can we make sure that this economic growth that we're seeing isn't just going to benefit the few, that it's going to benefit the many? And I think there's a concern that actually capitalism, something about the way that we're doing it isn't working, and the way that I think some people are...
But is Davos the place to change this? Is Davos the place that will mean economic prosperity is for the many and not the few?
It's a pretty odd notion in some ways, isn't it? So the idea somehow that equality can be benefited by a bunch of people gathering in a rather nice Swiss ski resort with pizzas costed at £22 each. I mean, I think, you know, the very idea of that kind of remarkably top-down, incredibly elitist project suggests the problem isn't just about capitalism, whatever we might mean by that. It's some notion of the concentration of power in very, very few hands. And I don't see how that can possibly drive forward a project of alleviating inequality. You know, I appreciate why Davos started. Davos has been going for 40-something years now. You know, I haven't seen any kind of measurable effects.
Do you see that difficulty, Ruth Porter, though, that it is almost an absurd notion to look at Davos and think that it can in any way, in any meaningful way, tackle the very real issue of inequality?
I'm not defending Davos. I mean, Davos occurs for better or for worse. What I'm saying is I think the intention behind it originally was a reasonable one, to say that actually the reality is these are people who do yield, for better or worse, disproportionate influence, and they set the culture. And I think what is timely now is that actually the original problem, which Davos was set up to sort, is something which we do need to be talking about now. How is it that we make sure that prosperity, which is something which benefits everyone?
Well, we are joined now from Davos by Sir Martin Sorrell, who is the boss of the world's largest advertising agency, WEP. Sir Martin, does it bother you at all that it seems for a great many people we've been speaking to, getting on with tough lives, that Davos and what goes on there seems totally irrelevant?
Well, I don't know about totally irrelevant. I mean, to be fair, Davos's track record in forecasting is not of the highest calibre. For example, in 2008, we were all here in January and we didn't foresee the financial crisis, the Lehman crisis or the Bear Stearns crisis, despite the fact we were going through a subprime and insurance monoline crisis at the end of 2007. So from a prediction point of view, sometimes Davos is out. But, you know, listening a little bit to the debate that you've had in the studio about the whys and wherefores, I think it would be a tremendous failure if we didn't communicate with the various interested groups. I mean, very interestingly, this year at Davos, we have something like, I think it's 300 government officials in one way or another. I think we have 40 heads of state. We've had some trailblazing discussions on Iran, on Israel and Palestine, on the Middle East generally, on Syria, and on other issues, and covered off all the grey swans that we talk about, you know, Mid-East crisis potential, the BRICS and hard and soft landings, US deficit and debt ceilings, and last...
Martin,
no, but So I think we do cover that. We do cover those issues, and I think communications is the key. As long as there's a dialogue. I mean, it's quite remarkable just to say that you have the Iranian president and the Israeli prime minister at the same conference within 2 hours of one another. You would never have bet on that. And it reminds me of when the Turkish prime minister met with the Cypriot prime minister here many, many years ago.
We're sitting in a kitchen just outside Stoke-on-Trent. We've been talking for the last few days to people who are really facing big challenges. It's almost the very notion of the world's elite on one stage talking to each other that makes the very idea that we're going to be tackling any sort of inequality there almost absurd.
Well, I think that's unfair and doesn't take into account the nature of the 2,500 people here. I mean, there are, for example, a large number of millennials, somewhat pretentiously called global shapers, I give you, but these are young people in 300 hubs around the world who are making a difference and are committed to making the world a better place. Now, we're focusing on the long-term issues.
Just
we're
very
focusing
briefly,
on the issues
sorry,
you touched on.
we don't have very long, Sir Martin, but on that issue
I don't do brief, I'm
and
sorry.
the widening gap between rich and poor.
Yeah, no, and I was just going to say, if you just let me just say, and I don't do brief, unemployment is the big issue. Youth unemployment is an even bigger issue. We have 50% unemployment in Spain. That is something that's being focused on. All the inequality issues are being focused on. The climate issues, the healthcare issues are all being focused on. I think the danger actually is focusing on the big issues like those and not focusing on the nitty-gritty, because as Axel Weber said in a panel we did with CNN and Time yesterday, for example, the asset tests that banks and financial institutions are going to have to go through later this year in Europe are going to cause problems for some financial institutions. So we have to look at the short term as well as the long term. And I think discussions here are valuable in that context.
Just to bring our other guests back in, thank you so much. But I mean, what do you make of that? That this is the place where the global change, the people are capable of bringing about this change.
Yeah, and there's two bits of this that stick in my throat a little. One is the idea that somebody like Martin Sorrell, who is, as far as I'm aware, hasn't been democratically elected to represent the people of the globe, is making various pronouncements and meeting with a whole bunch of, supposedly influential people. The other one is the idea of global hubs. And I think that's a particularly problematic notion. We're not sitting in a global hub here. Somewhere like Stoke is effectively, even though it's in a first world country and apparently a country that's coming out of recession, is somewhere that's being left behind.
I'm really sorry, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much for joining us. That is it from us here in Biddulph, and back to John in the studio.